All hope was fucking lost until the desperate Prilorians sent their plea into the stars, praying for a miracle as the Krill war machines razed their cities to rubble. Against all odds, that prayer was answered by humanity. Now it falls to a small band of humans to do the impossible, snatch victory from the jaws of annihilation. The distress signal that started it all reached Earth like a meteor strike. It detailed a nightmare scenario that the Prilorians, a once mighty alien empire, never thought they'd see again. The return of the Krill, a race bent on nothing less than total genocide to settle an old score. The Prilorian leader Alara had exhausted every option. The Krill were coming, a tidal wave of death and destruction. Her people's ships lay in ruin, their weapons useless against the enemy's armor. The Prilorians had mere days left, days until their entire species was extinguished forever. It was pure desperation that drove Alara to contact humanity, to stake everything on an unproven race from a distant corner of the galaxy. Earth received her plea, the horrifying truths it contained setting off shockwaves at the highest levels. One thing was clear. If the Prilorians fell, the Krill wouldn't stop there. They'd control the whole sector, and Earth would be next. Humanity had to act. Fast. The powers that be turned to the only one seemingly reckless enough to lead a mission this insane, Jesse Russell. A living legend in the Marine Corps, Jesse had stared down death on 100 worlds. There was no one better to lead a strike team on a suicide mission to the far side of the galaxy. When Jesse's dropships first streaked through the war-torn skies of the Prilorian homeworld, he could scarcely believe the devastation. Continent-sized cities that once gleamed with crystalline towers now lay in ruins. Smoke billowed from craters where the Krill bombardment had scoured away all signs of life. The planet's famed bioengineered wonders were now melted, charred wastelands. On the ground, the situation looked grimmer still. The Prilorians were in full retreat, their forces decimated. The Krill war machines advanced unchecked, skyscraper-sized monstrosities belching fire and death. Up close, it was obvious the Prilorians didn't stand a chance. But as Alara's haunted eyes met Jesse's, a flicker of hope stirred. Humanity was here. They were outgunned and outnumbered beyond belief, but they had a reputation for pulling off the impossible, for refusing to back down no matter the odds. It was do or die now, not just for the Prilorians, but for Earth too. Jesse gripped his weapon tighter as he watched the Krill advance on the horizon. This would be humanity's ultimate test, to stop an alien genocide, to announce humanity's arrival as a galactic power, and to do it against the most terrifying enemy he'd ever seen, one that seemed to hold all the cards. All he had to fall back on was human guts, ingenuity, and a whole lot of bullets. The fate of 2 worlds, maybe even the whole damn galaxy, hung in the balance. Jesse hit the ground hard, the shattered remnants of the Krill carrier ship raining down around him. Every breath felt like fire in his lungs, his body a map of pain from the wounds he'd sustained. But he was alive. Somehow, against impossible odds, he'd made it out. Jesus Christ, Russell, you look like hammered shit. Lieutenant Chen's voice cut through the ringing in Jesse's ears as she and Hawkins half-dragged, half-carried him back to their makeshift base. The base was little more than a few battered Prilorian structures haphazardly reinforced with scavenged materials. But it was the best they could manage in the ruins of the military compound they'd hastily commandeered upon arrival. Inside, Jesse collapsed onto a cot, gritting his teeth as Hawkins started patching him up with their dwindling medical supplies. "Sit rep," he managed to grunt out. Chen shook her head. "It's not good, Jesse. That stunt with the carrier bought us some time, but the Krill will regroup soon, and we're running low on, well, everything." Jesse pushed himself up on his elbows, ignoring the searing pain. "Hawkins, tell me you've made progress with the Prilorian tech." The corporal looked up from his work, his face grim. "Some, sir. Their weapons are light years ahead of ours, but they're not designed for the kind of guerrilla tactics we need. I'm trying to jerry-rig their power cells to boost our own guns, but it's slow going." Jesse nodded, his mind already racing. They needed an edge, and fast. He turned to Alara, the Prylorian leader who had become an unlikely ally in this desperate fight. What else can you tell us about the Krill? There has to be a weakness we can exploit. Alara's iridescent eyes met his, filled with a mix of despair and steadfast perseverance. The Krill are not like us, Commander Russell. They do not think or act as individuals. Each warrior is but a piece of a greater whole, controlled by the will of their queen. She paused, as if struck by a sudden thought. If we could disrupt that connection, even for a moment, it could throw their entire force into chaos. Jesse leaned forward, ignoring the scream of protest from his battered body. How? A virus, Ilara said slowly, introduced into their communication network. It could sever the link between the Queen and her warriors, if only briefly. Jesse turned to Hawkins. Can you do it? The corporal hesitated, then nodded. I'd need to get access to one of their ships, but yeah, I think I could rig something up. Jesse closed his eyes for a moment, the weight of the decision settling on his shoulders. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble, but what choice did they have? As night fell over the ruined city, Jesse led his small infiltration team through the shadows. Chen and Hawkins flanked him, their faces set with unyielding commitment. Zelos, the Prylorian scout Alara had assigned to guide them, moved ahead with silent grace. Their target loomed ahead, a massive krill carrier ship, its chitinous hull glinting in the moonlight. Jesse signaled his team forward, his heart pounding in his chest. They breached the ship's defenses with a flurry of gunfire and explosions, carving a path to the central communications hub. But as Hawkins worked feverishly to upload the virus, all hell broke loose. Alarms blared as krill warriors swarmed the chamber, their exoskeletons deflecting the team's desperate volleys. In the chaos, a searing bolt of plasma found its mark, and Zelos crumpled to the ground, a smoking hole in his chest. Jesse made the call in a heartbeat. Chen, Hawkins, get Zelos out of here. I'll finish the upload. But sir, Chen started to protest. That's an order, Lieutenant, Jesse roared, already turning to face the oncoming horde. Now go! As his team reluctantly retreated, dragging the wounded Zelos between them, Jesse let the rage and adrenaline take over. He fought like a man possessed, his rifle bucking in his hands as he cut down krill after krill. But there were too many. Their blows rained down on him, his armor cracking, blood seeping from a dozen wounds. He could feel his strength ebbing with each passing second. Just as he was about to be overwhelmed, a sudden stillness fell over the krill. The virus had taken hold, severing their connection to the hive mind. For a precious few moments, they stood frozen, confusion rippling through their ranks. It was all the opening Jesse needed. With the last of his strength, he smacked his head down on the detonator, setting off the charges he'd planted on his way in. The world erupted in fire and shrapnel as Jesse hurled himself towards the gaping hole the explosions had torn in the ship's hull. Somehow, he managed to stagger clear of the blast radius just as the carrier began to break apart, massive chunks of debris raining down around him. He hit the ground hard, his vision swimming, every breath an agony. He was dimly aware of hands grabbing him, dragging him away from the wreckage. Chen's voice shouting orders, Hawkins's face etched with worry. As Jesse slipped into unconsciousness, he knew that they had struck a blow against the krill this day. But it was only the beginning. The real fight, the fight for the survival of the Prylorians and humanity itself, was just getting started. And God help them all, Jesse thought as the darkness claimed him, because it was going to be a long and brutal one. Jesse's body burned with every step as Chen and Hawkins half-carried him through the twisted wreckage of the Prylorian base. Medics swarmed them the moment they stumbled through the makeshift barricade, whisking Jesse away on a stretcher. Get him stabilized, Chen barked, her voice hoarse from the acrid smoke. I want a full report on his condition in an hour. As the medical team rushed Jesse into surgery, Chen turned to survey their battered defenses. Hawkins, get me a damage assessment, and find out if any of that Prylorian tech survived the assault. Hours passed in a blur of frantic activity. Jesse drifted in and out of consciousness, vaguely aware of urgent voices and the sting of nanite injections knitting his flesh back together. When he finally opened his eyes, Alara's iridescent face swam into view. "You've done it, Commander Russell," she said, her voice tinged with both hope and weariness. "Your actions bought us precious time. Thousands of our people are now safe in the deep bunkers." Jesse tried to sit up, wincing at the pain. "But the Krill will retaliate," Alara finished grimly. "The Queen will not take this setback lightly. We must prepare for her full wrath." As Jesse recuperated, the base hummed with activity. Hawkins worked alongside Prylorian engineers, their fingers flying over holographic displays as they integrated human and alien tech. "We've done it, sir," Hawkins exclaimed, bursting into Jesse's room days later. "Check this out." He hefted a rifle that pulsed with an eerie blue light. Prylorian crystal tech, twice the range, 3 times the stopping power. Jesse grinned, feeling hope kindle in his chest for the first time since they'd arrived on this war-torn world. Their celebration was short-lived. Alarms blared through the compound, and Jesse stumbled to his feet, ignoring the protests of his still-healing body. Outside, the sky darkened with swarms of Krill dropships. Wave after wave of chitinous warriors crashed against the hastily erected defenses. Jesse found himself shoulder to shoulder with Chen, Prylorian soldiers on either side as they fought to hold the line. "The shield generator's overheating," Hawkins shouted over the din of battle. "It won't last much longer." Just when all seemed lost, a familiar voice cut through the chaos. "Commander Russell!" It was Zelos, the Prylorian scout, limping towards them with fierce commitment. "I have information that could turn the tide of this war." In a moment of quiet between Krill assaults, Zelos revealed the existence of the Unbound, Krill, who had broken free of the Queen's control. If they could find these rebels, they might stand a chance against the seemingly unstoppable horde. Jesse's mind raced, a desperate plan forming. "Chen," he called out, "I need you to hit the Krill staging ground hard. Draw their forces away. I'm taking a team to find these Unbound." Chen nodded grimly, understanding the risks. As she led the diversionary attack, Jesse gathered a small strike force. With Zelos as their guide, they slipped past enemy lines and into the heart of Krill-controlled territory. They moved swiftly through the ruins of once great Prylorian cities, encountering pockets of resistance along the way. Guerrilla fighters, their faces gaunt with hunger but eyes burning with defiance, shared what intel they could about the Unbound's rumored gathering place. As they pushed deeper into enemy territory, Jesse couldn't shake the feeling they were being watched. He signaled for the team to take cover, just as a Krill patrol passed overhead, their mandibles clicking ominously. "We're running out of time," Zelos whispered urgently. "The meeting point is just beyond that ridge. If the Queen discovers our plan..." A bone-chilling screech split the air, followed by the thunderous sound of approaching Krill war machines. Jesse's blood ran cold as he realized a Krill commander had picked up their trail. "Move!" Jesse roared, urging his team forward. They sprinted across the open ground, plasma bolts sizzling past their ears. The fate of 2 worlds hung in the balance as they raced towards their last, desperate hope. The Unbound Krill and the chance to turn the tide of this devastating war. Jesse's lungs burned as he sprinted through the twisted wreckage of a fallen Prylorian skyscraper. Plasma bolts sizzled past, scorching the debris around him. "Move! Move!" he shouted, waving his team forward. Hawkins and Chen flanked him, their new Prylorian-enhanced rifles pulsing with blue energy as they returned fire. Zelos darted ahead, his lithe form weaving through obstacles with preternatural grace. For days they had pushed deeper into Krill territory, always one step ahead of their pursuers. Sleep came in snatched moments, huddled in the ruins of bombed-out buildings or hidden in the vast network of underground tunnels Zelos guided them through. "We're close!" Zelos called back, his voice barely audible over the screech of Krill flyers overhead. "The mining facility should be just beyond that ridgeline." They crested the hill, chests heaving, to find an immense mountain looming before them. At its base, a gaping maw of twisted metal marked the entrance to the abandoned mine. "Hold up," Jesse signaled. dropping to a crouch. He scanned the area, noting scorch marks and signs of recent activity. Looks like someone's home. They approached cautiously, weapons at the ready. The silence was broken by a chitinous screech from behind. Jesse whirled to see a massive krill warrior bearing down on them, its mandibles clicking furiously. "Contact!" Chen yelled, opening fire. Her shots pinged harmlessly off the creature's armored carapace. More krill poured from the mine entrance, their exoskeletons adorned with strange, swirling patterns. For a moment, Jesse thought they were done for. Then the air filled with the distinctive whine of krill weapons, but they weren't aimed at Jesse's team. The new arrivals unleashed a barrage on their pursuers, tearing them apart in seconds. "Stand down!" A deep, resonant voice boomed. A towering krill stepped forward, its eyes gleaming with an intelligence Jesse had never seen in their kind before. "I am Krozak, and you must be the humans we've heard whispers about." The next hours passed in a blur of revelations. Krozak explained how they had broken free of the Queen's control, fighting to reclaim their lost heritage. When news came of Jesse's team battling the Queen's forces, the Unbound saw an opportunity. Their conference was cut short by the scream of incoming dropships. The Queen's elite forces had caught up, led by a commander whose very presence seemed to make the air crackle with malevolent energy. "To arms, brothers!" Krozak roared, hefting a massive cannon. "Today we fight for our freedom!" The battle that followed was chaos incarnate. Jesse found himself fighting side by side with Unbound krill, their chitinous forms providing cover as he picked off attackers. Hawkins jury-rigged Prylorian shield generators, giving them precious moments of respite between waves. When the dust settled, both sides had taken heavy losses, but as Jesse surveyed the battlefield, littered with the broken forms of their enemies, he felt a glimmer of hope. Krozak approached, ichor dripping from a gash in his carapace. "You fight well, human. Perhaps together we can end this war." Jesse nodded, his mind already racing with possibilities. "We need to hit them where it hurts. Take out the Queen herself." Krozak's mandibles clicked in what might have been a grim smile. "A bold plan, but with our knowledge of krill defenses and your unpredictability, it might just work." As they began to plan their assault on the heart of the krill empire, Jesse knew the odds were still stacked against them. But for the first time since this war began, he dared to believe they had a fighting chance. Jesse's team pushed through the hostile krill territory, their footsteps echoing in the desolate landscape. Days stretched into weeks as they navigated treacherous terrain, always on high alert. "Contact left," Hawkins shouted, his rifle already spitting blue energy bolts. A krill patrol burst from cover, mandibles clicking furiously. The air filled with plasma fire and the screech of dying krill. When the dust settled, two of their Prylorian allies lay motionless on the ground. "We can't keep taking losses like this," Jesse muttered, wiping ichor from his armor. Krozak's multifaceted eyes scanned the horizon. "We're close. The Queen's lair lies just beyond that mountain range." As they crested the final ridge, Jesse's breath caught in his throat. Before them loomed a colossal hive structure, its organic architecture fused seamlessly with the mountain itself. Energy shields shimmered around its perimeter, crackling with lethal potential. "By the spirits," Zelos whispered, "how can we possibly breach that?" Krozak's mandibles clicked grimly. The Queen's Praetorian Guard surrounds her at all times. A frontal assault would be suicide. Jesse's mind raced, piecing together fragments of information. "What about from below? You mentioned abandoned mining networks." Krozak's antennae twitched in surprise. "Yes. With Prylorian tunneling tech and our knowledge of the hive's layout, we might just pull it off." As Chen's diversionary force engaged the hive's outer defenses, Jesse led his team into the dark maw of an ancient mine shaft. They navigated twisting passages, the air growing hotter with each step. "Watch your footing," Zelos warned as they skirted a pool of bubbling magma. "One wrong step and..." A distant screech cut him off. Krill patrols, closing in fast. "Move!" Jesse hissed, urging the team forward. They reached the planned infiltration point, the rock above them thrumming with the hive's bioelectric pulse. Prilorian drills whirred to life, boring upward with agonizing slowness. Suddenly, a thunderous crack split the air. The tunnel behind them collapsed in a shower of rock and dust, sealing their exit. "We've been made," Hawkins growled, readying his weapon. Jesse nodded grimly. "No choice but to push forward. Let's end this." They burst into the hive's central chamber, weapons blazing. Krill warriors swarmed toward them, their chitinous armor deflecting some of the incoming fire. And there, on a pulsating organic throne, sat the Krill Queen. Her massive form dwarfed even Krozak, her compound eyes glowing with malevolent intelligence. A wave of psychic force slammed into Jesse's mind, threatening to overwhelm him. He gritted his teeth, focusing on the faces of those he'd lost, using the pain to anchor himself against the assault. "For Earth, for Prylos," he roared, his voice nearly lost in the din of battle. Krozak charged the Queen, his massive frame colliding with hers in a clash of chitin and raw power. For a moment it seemed the unbound warrior might prevail. But the Queen's psionic assault redoubled, and Krozak stumbled, his movements growing sluggish. Jesse saw their window of opportunity closing fast. He turned to the remnants of his team, his voice hoarse. "Get out of here. I'll finish this." As they retreated, Jesse activated the failsafe in his armor. Energy crackled around him as he sprinted toward the Queen, each step bringing him closer to what might be the end of the war, and himself. The crackling energy from Jesse's overloading armor intensified, arcing across the chamber in jagged bolts. The Krill Queen's psionic assault bore down on him with crushing force, threatening to shatter his mind. But as the feedback loop surged through the hive's neural network, Krozak seized his chance. The massive unbound warrior lunged forward, his chitinous form a blur of motion. His claws tore into the Queen's exposed flank, rending flesh and spraying ichor across the pulsating chamber floor. The Queen's shriek of pain and rage reverberated through the hive, momentarily disrupting her psychic grip. Jesse collapsed to the ground, smoke rising from his scorched neural implants. His eyes rolled back, body convulsing as synapses misfired. Krozak scooped up the human's limp form, cradling him against his armored carapace. "Hold on, brother," Krozak's deep voice rumbled as he charged down a twisting biomechanical corridor. The thunderous footsteps of pursuing Krill warriors echoed behind them. Krozak's antennae twitched, sensing a familiar pheromone signature. He veered sharply, ducking into a half-forgotten passage. The walls pulsed with a sickly bioluminescence, revealing row upon row of gelatinous sacs. "A spawning chamber," Krozak muttered, his mandibles clicking with unease. He gently lowered Jesse to the ground, the human's breathing shallow and erratic. Krozak worked quickly, using remnants of shattered egg casings to construct a makeshift barricade. The distant screeches of their pursuers grew louder with each passing second. Krozak's multifaceted eyes fixed on Jesse's pale face. The human's mind was slipping away, lost in the trauma of the psionic backlash. There was only one chance, but the risks were immense. Krozak placed his clawed hands on either side of Jesse's head, focusing his own psionic energy. He pushed through layers of alien thought patterns, searching for the core of Jesse's consciousness. "Jesse," Krozak's voice echoed in the human's fractured mindscape. "Your body is failing. We must transfer your essence, or all is lost." In the physical world, Jesse's body spasmed. Within the psychic plane, his consciousness recoiled from the alien presence. "Trust me," Krozak urged. "Your will is strong. You can survive this." Krozak guided Jesse's fleeing mind towards one of the unhatched Krill forms. The process was excruciating. Jesse's very being stretched and twisted as it struggled to adapt to the alien neural architecture. Eons seemed to pass in the span of heartbeats. Then, with a wet, tearing sound, one of the egg sacs burst open. A Krill form emerged, ichor dripping from its carapace. Its movements were unsteady, antennae twitching erratically. "Jesse?" Krozak asked, his tone hopeful. The newly born krill turned, its compound eyes focusing on Krozak. When it spoke, the voice was a strange blend of chittering clicks and Jesse's familiar cadence. This is beyond weird," Jesse managed, flexing his new clawed appendages. A thunderous crash shook the chamber. The barricade began to splinter under the assault of the Queen's forces. "We must move," Krozak urged, helping steady Jesse as he took his first awkward steps in his new form. "The Queen is wounded, but her wrath will be terrible. Our only hope lies in reaching her throne-world ship." Jesse's new krill eyes darted to his discarded human body. A pang of loss hit him, but he pushed it aside. There would be time to mourn later, if they survived. "Lead the way," Jesse clicked, his mandibles working to form the unfamiliar sounds. "Let's end this." They slipped out through a half-hidden passage just as the barricade gave way. Krill warriors poured into the spawning chamber, oblivious to the two rebels now moving undetected among their ranks. Jesse's new senses were overwhelming. Pheromone signatures, electromagnetic pulses, the constant background hum of the hive mind. But with each step, his movements grew more assured. They wove through the labyrinthine corridors of the hive, drawing closer to the massive biomechanical structure that was the Queen's throne-world ship. Waves of disoriented krill swarmed around them, the hive mind in chaos following the Queen's injury. "There," Krozak indicated a pulsating sphincter-like opening, "the entrance to the ship's central nexus." They pushed through, entering a vast chamber dominated by twisting strands of biocircuitry. At its heart stood a pillar of crackling energy, the neural uplink to the wounded Queen. Jesse approached the uplink, his new krill form trembling with a mix of fear and anticipation. He reached out, clawed hands sinking into the gelatinous interface. The world fell away as Jesse's consciousness plunged into the data stream. The Queen's presence loomed before him, wounded but still impossibly vast. Her fury washed over him in waves of scorching psionic energy. Jesse felt his sense of self beginning to fray at the edges. But he pushed back, drawing on memories of Earth, of his team, of everything he'd fought for. His human ingenuity clashed against the Queen's ancient tyranny in a battle of pure will. Slowly, improbably, Jesse began to gain ground. He could feel the Queen's control slipping, her iron grip on the Krill collective loosening. Across Prilorian space, Krill warriors faltered, momentarily freed from her dominance. Krozak's voice cut through the psychic maelstrom. "Now, Jesse, the signal!" With the last reserves of his strength, Jesse broadcast the call to rebellion, a clarion cry that resonated through the splintering hive mind, igniting the spark of free will in countless Krill. The Queen howled in rage and desperation. She summoned a final, devastating surge of psionic energy. Jesse felt his new Krill form beginning to disintegrate under the onslaught. In that moment, Jesse knew what he had to do. There was only one way to ensure the Queen's hold would be broken forever. He pushed deeper into the neural uplink, surrendering his physical form. For Earth, Jesse thought as his consciousness diffused into the data stream. For Prylos, for freedom. A blinding flash of energy erupted from the neural interface. When it faded, Jesse's Krill body lay lifeless on the chamber floor. But throughout Prilorian space, the Krill hive mind shuddered and fractured, forever sundered from the Queen's dominion. Jesse's consciousness fractured, scattering across the vast expanse of the Krill neural network. The alien datascape pulsed with alien thoughts and sensations, threatening to subsume his very essence. Yet even as his mind stretched thin, Jesse clung to the core of his identity. Memories flashed through his disembodied awareness. Earth's blue skies, the faces of his team, the weight of his rifle. Each recollection anchored him, a lifeline in the chaotic sea of Krill consciousness. Outside, in the physical realm, the battle raged. Lieutenant Chen's voice crackled over comm channels as human and Prilorian forces surged forward. "Push through their lines. The Queen's hold is weakening." Plasma bolts sizzled through the air, punctuated by the screech of dying krill. Krozak, his massive form a beacon for the rebelling unbound, tore through the Queen's loyalist guards. His mandibles clicked in a war cry that resonated through the hive structure. Within the neural matrix, Jesse's fragmented self coalesced. The data stream swirled around him, a maelstrom of information and alien thought patterns. He pushed back against the tide, carving out a space for his human consciousness. The Queen's presence loomed, a dark and writhing mass in the psychic landscape. Her fury radiated outward, tendrils of hate and domination seeking to reassert control over her fractured empire. Jesse steeled himself, drawing on reserves of willpower he didn't know he possessed. The Queen's psychic assault crashed against his mental defenses. Pain lanced through his non-existent synapses as alien concepts and impossible geometries threatened to overwhelm him. But Jesse fought back. He conjured images of Earth's oceans, let the memory of sunlight on his skin bolster his persistence. The Queen recoiled, unable to comprehend the depth of human experience. In the physical world, Ilara led a squad of Prilorian shock troops through the twisting corridors of the Throne World ship. Energy weapons flashed, cutting down pockets of resistance. "We're approaching the central core," she reported, her voice tight with tension. Jesse sensed the Queen's attention shift, drawn to the threat in the material realm. He seized the opportunity, reaching out with tendrils of thought to probe the Queen's defenses. A plan began to form in the depths of his consciousness. He crafted an illusion within the data stream, a false representation of himself fleeing through the neural pathways. The Queen's arrogance blinded her to the trap, her vast consciousness surging forward in pursuit. Layer after layer of the datascape fell away as Jesse led the Queen on a wild chase through the virtual realm. Each step drew her further from her seat of power, away from the anchoring influence of her physical form. In a final decisive moment, Jesse sprang his trap. The illusory pathway collapsed, leaving the Queen's consciousness suspended in a void of Jesse's creation. Panic radiated from her trapped essence as she realized the depth of her mistake. The severance sent shockwaves through the entire Krill network. In the Throne World ship's corridors, Krill warriors stumbled, suddenly freed from the last vestiges of the Queen's control. Krozak's voice boomed through the ship's communication systems. "The Queen has fallen! To all Krill who can hear me, lay down your weapons. The age of tyranny is over." As the remaining Krill forces surrendered, Prilorian and human ships moved to disable the now leaderless armada. The tide of the war had turned, victory within reach at last. Jesse's consciousness drifted in the data stream, exhausted but triumphant. He had won, but at a terrible cost. His physical form was gone, leaving him trapped in this virtual existence. Alara's voice echoed in the emptiness, filled with a mix of joy and sorrow. "Jesse, can you hear me? We did it. We won. But we're not giving up on you. We'll find a way to bring you back. I promise." In the formless void of the datascape, Jesse's essence pulsed with hope. The war was over, but a new challenge lay ahead. Somehow he would find his way home. The Prilorian capital buzzed with activity as Allied forces worked to secure their hard-fought victory. In a cavernous chamber deep within the city's heart, Lieutenant Chen hunched over a console, his fingers flying across alien controls. Sweat beaded on his brow as he struggled to interpret the cascade of data flowing across the screen. "Anything?" Corporal Hawkins asked, peering over Chen's shoulder. Chen shook his head. "Nothing yet. Jesse's neural signature is like a ghost in the machine. We can sense echoes but can't pin him down." Nearby, Prilorian scientists chittered in their native tongue, adjusting equipment that melded human and alien tech in ways Chen still struggled to comprehend. Weeks of failure burdened immensely on the team, but they pressed on, driven by the memory of their lost comrade. A commotion at the chamber's entrance drew their attention. Zelos, the Prilorian scout, burst in, clutching an ancient data crystal. "I found something!" he exclaimed, his multifaceted eyes glinting with excitement. Chen and Hawkins crowded around as Zelos inserted the crystal into a reader. Holographic text flickered to life, detailing a long-abandoned Prilorian project. Neural transferal technology, Hawkins breathed, scanning the alien script. This could be our key to reaching Jesse. Word spread quickly. Within hours, Alara stood before a hastily assembled war council, her voice ringing with dedication. We have a chance to bring him back. I'm authorizing full allocation of resources to restore this system. The next days saw a flurry of activity. Human engineers worked alongside Prilorian techs and even a contingent of unbound krill, their varied expertise combining to breathe life into machinery dormant for millennia. In the transfer chamber, Hawkins calibrated delicate instruments as ancient capacitors hummed to life. Initiating neural uplink, he announced, his voice tense. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a flicker of energy danced across the transfer platform. A disembodied voice, faint but unmistakably Jesse's, echoed through the chamber. Hear me? Is anyone... Jesse, Chen shouted, leaning towards the comm. We're here. Hold on. But the connection wavered, static drowning out Jesse's reply. Warning klaxons blared as the system struggled under the immense psychic load. Alara's eyes hardened with commitment. We're losing him. Prepare for full neural transfer. I'm going in after him. But Commander, Hawkins protested, the risks are nothing compared to what he sacrificed for us. Alara cut him off, striding towards the platform. Krozak stepped forward, his massive form dwarfing the human equipment. I will anchor you, he rumbled. My warriors and I will maintain the psychic bridge. Alara nodded, lying back on the transfer bed. As the system powered up, she felt a wrenching sensation, her consciousness torn from her body and hurled into a maelstrom of data and alien thought patterns. She tumbled through a kaleidoscope of fractured memories and sensory impressions. Fragments of Jesse's essence swirled around her, pulled apart by the chaotic currents of the krill data stream. Jesse, Alara called out, her non-corporeal form straining against the psychic turbulence. Focus on my voice. Remember who you are. Slowly, painstakingly, shards of Jesse's consciousness began to coalesce. His familiar presence brushed against Alara's mind, confused but growing stronger. Alara, where are we? No time to explain, she urged, sensing the instability of their connection. We need to go, now. She reached out, merging her essence with Jesse's fragmented psyche. Together, they fought against the rising tide of alien data threatening to tear them apart. Alara felt the tether of Krozak's psychic anchor straining, the gateway back to reality flickering dangerously. With a final, desperate push, Alara hurled their combined consciousness towards the fading portal. As they crossed the threshold, a deafening psychic shriek tore through the data stream. The last thing Alara sensed was the searing heat of overloading circuits as the world exploded into blinding light. The blinding light faded, replaced by a cacophony of alarms and shouting. Lieutenant Chen blinked rapidly, his eyes adjusting to the dim emergency lighting of the transfer chamber. Acrid smoke filled the air, stinging his nostrils. Status report, he barked, scanning the chaos around him. A Prilorian technician chittered urgently, gesturing towards the transfer platform. Vital signs critical, neural patterns destabilizing rapidly. Chen rushed to Alara's side. She lay motionless, her skin ashen. Nearby, a swirling mass of energy pulsed erratically, all that remained of Jesse's consciousness. Get them to medical now, Chen ordered, his voice cracking with urgency. Hours blurred into days as the medical teams worked tirelessly. Chen paced outside the hastily constructed biocontainment chamber, its translucent walls offering a glimpse of the nightmare within. Jesse's essence, a fragmented cloud of light and data, writhed in constant agony. Dr. Venn, the lead Prilorian scientist, approached Chen with mandibles clicking in agitation. Lieutenant, we're running out of options. Jesse's neural patterns are deteriorating faster than we can stabilize them. Chen rubbed his temples, exhaustion etched on his face. What about Alara? Still comatose, Dr. Venn replied. The psychic trauma was severe. A deep, rumbling voice interrupted their conversation. There may be another way. Chen turned to see Krozak, the imposing, unbound Krill leader, step into the cramped corridor. The alien's compound eyes gleamed with an unsettling intensity. "What are you proposing?" Chen asked warily. Krozak's mandibles twitched. "We have reclaimed Krill birthing matrices. With genetic engineering, we could create a hybrid vessel, part human, part Krill. It may be Jesse's only chance at survival." Chen recoiled. "You want to turn him into one of you?" "Not exactly," Krozak replied. "A new form bridging both our species, but we must act quickly." Chen's mind raced, weighing the impossible choice before him. He glanced at Corporal Hawkins, who had been silently observing the exchange. "What do you think, Hawkins?" Chen asked, his voice heavy with the weight of the decision. Hawkins stared at the bio-containment chamber, watching Jesse's essence flicker and dim. He took a deep breath. "Jesse never backed down from a fight, sir. He'd want us to try, no matter how crazy it seems." Chen nodded grimly. "Do it." The next weeks passed in a blur of feverish activity. Chen watched as the hybrid form took shape within the alien birthing chamber, a mass of flesh and biomechanical components pulsing with eerie life. Finally, the day of the transfer arrived. Chen stood with Hawkins and Krozak as the Prilorian and Krill scientists initiated the procedure. Jesse's disembodied consciousness surged into the hybrid form. The chamber filled with an otherworldly scream, part human, part alien. The hybrid body convulsed violently, its form shifting and stabilizing in rapid succession. "Jesse!" Chen called out. "Fight it! Remember who you are!" For agonizing minutes, the hybrid thrashed. Then slowly, the movements became more controlled. The screaming faded to ragged breaths. Two eyes, one human, one compound, opened and focused on Chen. A voice, gravelly and strange yet unmistakably Jesse's, spoke. What have I become?" Chen approached cautiously, taking in Jesse's new form. The hybrid body was a fusion of human and Krill anatomy. Powerful limbs ending in wickedly sharp claws, chitinous armor plates interspersed with patches of human skin. "How do you feel?" Chen asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Jesse flexed his new appendages, mandibles clicking thoughtfully. "Different, powerful, but still me, I think." Krozak stepped forward, his massive form dwarfing even Jesse's new hybrid body. "Your sacrifice has opened new possibilities, Jesse. With your unique perspective, you could help guide our people into a new era of cooperation." Jesse's compound eye swiveled to focus on the unbound leader. "What do you mean?" Krozak explained his vision of repurposing the Krill Armada as a peacekeeping force. Jesse listened intently, his human and alien features betraying a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. I need time to think," Jesse said finally, his clawed hand running over the smooth carapace of his head. Chen nodded, placing a comforting hand on Jesse's shoulder. "Take all the time you need. We'll be here for you, no matter what." As Jesse took his first tentative steps in his new body, Chen couldn't help but wonder what the future held for his friend, and for all of them, in this brave new universe. The harsh fluorescent lights of the medical bay stung Alara's eyes as she regained consciousness. She blinked rapidly, her vision clearing to reveal the concerned faces of Dr. Ven and Lieutenant Chen hovering over her. "Welcome back, Commander," Chen said, relief evident in his voice. Alara struggled to sit up, her muscles protesting after weeks of disuse. "Jesse? Where's Jesse?" she croaked, her throat dry and raw. Chen and Dr. Ven exchanged uneasy glances. He's alive," Chen said hesitantly, "but you need to prepare yourself." Alara's heart raced as they helped her to her feet. She stumbled towards the observation window, her legs weak and unsteady. What she saw through the reinforced glass made her gasp involuntarily. Jesse stood in the center of a sterile chamber, his new form a grotesque fusion of human and Krill anatomy. Chitinous plates covered portions of his body, interspersed with patches of familiar skin. His left arm ended in a wickedly sharp claw, while his right remained mostly human. One eye was unmistakably alien, a compound orb that swiveled independently of his human eye. "Jesse?" Ilara whispered, pressing her hand against the glass. His head snapped towards her, mandibles clicking. Recognition flickered in his mismatched eyes. "Ilara," he said, his voice a dissonant blend of human speech and insectoid clicks. Ilara fought to keep her expression neutral, but couldn't entirely mask her horror at his transformation. "How do you feel?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Strong," Jesse replied, flexing his new limbs. "Different, but still me, I think." Before Ilara could respond, Krozak's massive form filled the doorway. "We must act quickly," the unbound leader rumbled. "The Krill Armada grows more chaotic by the hour. Jesse's unique perspective could be the key to bringing them under control." Ilara turned to Jesse, searching his alien features for any hint of the man she once knew. "Are you up for this?" she asked softly. Jesse nodded, his compound eye focusing on her intently. "I have to try," he said. "For all of us." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Ilara watched anxiously as Jesse was connected to a complex array of neural interfaces designed to link his hybrid mind with the remnants of the Krill hive network. As the uplink initiated, Jesse's body went rigid. His eyes rolled back, leaving only the alien orb visible. It pulsed with an eerie light as data streamed across nearby monitors. At first, everything seemed to be going according to plan. Jesse's voice, tinged with an unsettling echo, spoke through the comm system. "I can feel them. So many minds. Lost. Angry. I can guide them." But as the minutes ticked by, something began to change. Jesse's human eye snapped open, darting wildly. His voice grew harsher, more guttural. "No. Must. Resist." Ilara leaned towards the microphone. "Jesse, what's happening?" His response chilled her to the bone. "Ilara, help me. I'm losing myself." On the monitors, activity spiked across all channels. Jesse's body contorted, his new exoskeleton creaking under the strain. When he spoke again, his voice was barely recognizable. "All units, prepare for immediate deployment. Target, Prilorian Colony World Nexus Prime. Cleanse all non-Krill life forms." Chen's face paled. "My God, he's giving attack orders to the entire armada." Ilara watched in horror as Jesse's hands flew across the neural interface controls, inputting coordinates and battle plans with inhuman speed. His human eye had gone blank, while the Krill orb blazed with malevolent purpose. "We have to stop this," Ilara said, her voice tight with anguish. She turned to the Prilorian technicians. "Cut the uplink, now!" Krozak stepped forward, mandibles flaring. "No, we cannot abandon this chance to—" Ilara silenced him with a glare. "That's an order. Jam the signal." The room erupted into frantic activity. Alarms blared as the technicians worked to sever Jesse's connection to the hive mind. Inside the chamber, Jesse's body convulsed violently, a horrific scream tearing from his throat. With a final, sickening lurch, Jesse collapsed to the floor, the monitors flatlined, an ominous silence falling over the room. Ilara rushed into the chamber, cradling Jesse's limp form. His eyes stared vacantly, no sign of recognition or awareness in either the human or Krill orb. "Jesse?" Ilara whispered, her voice breaking. "Can you hear me?" But there was no response. The spark of consciousness that had made Jesse who he was had been snuffed out, leaving behind only an empty shell, a grotesque monument to the perils of merging human and alien minds. As the gravity of their failure settled over the assembled team, Ilara fought back tears. They had won the war against the Krill, but at a cost she never could have imagined. And now, the threat of a rogue Krill armada loomed on the horizon, a terrifying legacy of their bold strategy. In the days that followed, Ilara threw herself into damage control. She coordinated with Krozak and the Unbound forces to contain the splintered Kryl fleets, all while overseeing the construction of a specialized containment unit for Jesse's comatose form. Standing before the newly sealed cryovault, Ilara placed her hand on the cold metal surface. Inside, Jesse's hybrid body floated in a sea of nano-stabilizers, the last remnants of his consciousness held in stasis. "We'll find a way to bring you back," Ilara whispered, though she wasn't sure if she truly believed it. "I promise." As she turned away from the vault, Ilara's gaze fell upon the display showing the chaotic movements of the Kryl armada, the once feared conquerors now reduced to leaderless, fractured hordes. And beyond them, the vast expanse of space, a reminder of how small and fragile they all were in the face of the universe's unfathomable mysteries. Ilara squared her shoulders, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. But she couldn't shake the nagging fear that their victory over the Kryl Queen had only been the beginning of a much darker chapter in humanity's journey among the stars.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.